The Kaathrix Combat Academy had stood for 11,000 years. Carved into the ice moon of Visara 9, it was less a school than a monument. A place where the galaxy's most dangerous species sent their young to learn the art of war before they ever learned the art of peace. Its halls had trained admirals who broke fleets, generals who ended civilizations, and warriors whose names alone could silence a council chamber. And every year, the Academy held its reckoning. A live broadcast tournament watched by over 400 member worlds of the Threshold Compact. It was tradition. It was spectacle. It was, above all, a message. This is what strength looks like. This year, for the first time in the Academy's long history, a human had been admitted. Her name was Corporal Mira Solis, 26 years old, formerly of the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Corps. She had been sent not as a prodigy, not as a champion, but as part of a new cultural exchange initiative. A polite phrase the Compact used for "let's see what the new species is capable of," without admitting we're curious. The alien students didn't know what to make of her. She was small, unremarkable by their standards. No bioluminescent markings, no retractable claws, no four-jointed arms capable of crushing durasteel. Just soft skin, round eyes, and a species reputation built entirely on rumor and half-verified battle reports from a war most of them hadn't paid attention to. "She looks like something you'd find under a rock," said Threll, a Kaathrix cadet with obsidian scales and a voice like grinding stone. He said it to laughter. Mira, sitting 3 rows back in the observation hall, said nothing. She simply watched the broadcast screen, where the Academy's champion roster scrolled past in slow, reverent procession. At the very top of that roster was a name every cadet feared. Vesa Korin, 7-time undefeated champion. The widow of the arena. No one had beaten her in 4 years. No one had even scored against. It was into this world that Mira Solis had been dropped, with nothing but a duffel bag, a translator implant, and the quiet, unassuming calm of someone who had already seen the worst that violence had to offer and had decided, long ago, not to be afraid of it anymore. The reckoning began, as it always did, with the lower brackets. Young cadets testing their strength against one another for the crowd's entertainment before the real matches began. Mira wasn't scheduled to fight. Humans weren't expected to fight at all. She was there to observe, to represent, to be a curiosity for the cameras. That suited her fine. She sat in the back row of the observation hall, boots up on the seat in front of her, watching duels with the calm interest of someone studying a new sport rather than a battlefield. "You are not frightened," Threll said, sliding into the seat beside her during a break between matches. It wasn't a question. Kaathrix didn't often ask questions they already knew the answers to. Everyone here fears the widow. Even the instructors lower their voices when they speak of her. "I've met scarier things than a person who's good at fighting," Mira said, not looking away from the screen. Threll's crest flared, the Kaathrix equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "There is nothing scarier than the widow." Mira finally turned to look at him. There was no bravado in her expression, no human posturing. Just a strange, tired patience that made the young cadet's scales prickle. "There's hunger," she said quietly. "There's watching people you love not come home. There's a whole planet burning because someone decided your species wasn't worth negotiating with." She shrugged, and the gesture felt heavier than it should have. "A duel with rules and a referee and a medic standing by? That's not scary, Threll. That's civilized." He didn't have a response to that. Neither did the 3 cadets sitting behind them, who had gone very still. The tension the Academy's instructors hadn't anticipated wasn't between species. It was inside their own tournament structure. 3 days into the reckoning, a viral outbreak swept through the lower dormitories. A mutated strain of Varinthi fever, harmless to most compact species but capable of causing severe respiratory collapse in the youth carry delegation, a small, fragile-boned species attending as junior observers. Compact medical protocol was clear. Quarantine, evacuate, treat with specialized antivirals kept in cold storage 3 levels below the arena. The problem was the storm. A sudden ion squall common on Visara 9's chaotic magnetosphere, but rarely this severe, had knocked out the Academy's primary power grid. Backup systems kept life support running, but the automated medical transport pods, the ones meant to carry critical patients through the lower levels, were offline. and the access corridor to the cold storage vault had partially collapsed under structural stress, sealed behind 3 tons of ice and twisted alloy. 17 youth carry cadets, gasping, feverish, running out of time. A blocked corridor, no working machinery, and a faculty of the galaxy's greatest warriors standing in the command center, arguing about deployment protocols and liability while precious minutes burned away. It was Mira who moved first. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for a committee. She grabbed a thermal cutting torch from an equipment locker, slung an emergency oxygen kit over her shoulder, and ran. Actually ran, boots pounding down stairwells while alarms wailed, toward the collapsed corridor. By the time the first Kaathrix instructors caught up with her, she was already 3 meters into the wreckage, cutting through twisted metal by hand, ice water soaking her uniform, breath fogging in the freezing air. Solis, this structure is unstable. You could be crushed. Then someone should probably help me instead of telling me that, she shouted back, not slowing down. What happened next would be replayed on compact news networks for the next standard year. Mira worked for 40 minutes straight, cutting, hauling debris, wedging support struts scavenged from a broken transport pod to keep the ceiling from coming down. She burned her hands on the torch twice and kept going. When the final barrier gave way and cold storage was reachable, she didn't celebrate. She just grabbed the antiviral cases and started running them back up herself, 2 at a time, because the automated pods still weren't working, and 17 children, because that's what junior cadets were, whatever their species, didn't have time to wait for repairs. She collapsed twice from exhaustion, got back up both times, and standing in the command center the entire time, watching the feed from the corridor cameras in absolute silence, was Vesa Korin, the widow of the arena, 7-time champion, a warrior who had never shown emotion on camera in 4 years of broadcast history. When Mira finally emerged from the lower levels, soaked, frostbitten, cradling the last case of antiviral against her chest like it was the only thing that mattered in the universe, Vesa was waiting at the top of the stairwell. The entire hall had gone silent. "You could have died," Vesa said. Her voice, so famous for its cold precision in the arena, carried something the cadets had never heard in it before. Mira, swaying slightly on her feet, managed a tired smile. "Yeah, probably would've, if it had taken 10 more minutes." She held out the case. "Get this to the medics. I'm gonna go sit down before I fall down." Vesa took the case, but she didn't move. She just stared at this small, exhausted, unremarkable-looking human who had run toward a collapsing structure with nothing but a torch and a spare oxygen tank, for people who weren't even her own species. "Why?" Vesa finally asked. "They are not your kind. There was no glory in this. No broadcast credit. The reckoning does not reward rescues." Mira looked at her like the question genuinely confused her. "They were dying," she said simply. "That's the only reason I needed." The footage went out across all 400 worlds of the compact within hours. Analysts and generals who had spent decades studying human military capability, armor ratings, weapon yields, fleet tactics, found themselves instead studying something they had no framework for. A woman with no rank, no reward waiting, no strategic advantage to gain, who had simply decided that other beings' lives were worth more than her own safety. The Academy's instructors, in a closed-door session that would later leak to compact media, voted unanimously to award Corporal Mira Solis the Academy's highest honor. Not for combat, not for the reckoning she never fought in, but for what they began calling, in translated Kaathrix, the strength beneath the strength. Vesa Korin, undefeated champion, never fought Mira Solis in the arena. She didn't need to. She had already seen, in a collapsing corridor beneath the ice, something no duel could measure. A courage that asked for nothing, that fought not to prove itself, but simply because someone needed saving. Years later, when younger cadets asked the widow who the strongest warrior she'd ever witnessed was, she never named a champion, a general, or a legend of the arena. She spoke instead of a small human sitting quietly in the back row, who ran toward the collapse when everyone else was still debating whether it was worth the risk. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.